Hello everybody, this is Courtney with Fiberfox Studios, and today we are going to be working on this arrow design. You can kind of intermix it with a lot of different other patterns, and we are going to be using, as always in these tutorials, two colors of yarn. The first one I have here is the Hayfield Bonus DK, and you can see it's a really pretty blue color. This particular color number is 0645. And that's the Hayfield that I bought over on Darimore's. I'm also going to be using the Hayfield Bonus DK Extra Value, same yarn, in the shade number 0957, just for anyone who wants to get these same exact colors. And I have a link down below in the description to not only the chart, which includes some bonus versions of this chart, but also to Darimore's. If you've never used them before, the code or the link that's below will actually give you $5 off. We're going to get started by doing a chain. So we're going to be working on this pattern in a chain that starts in a multiple of 9 plus 3 at the end. So we're going to move the swatch over out of the way, and we're going to be working, like I said, with 9 plus 3. So the very first thing we need to do is create our slip knot. So I like to wrap it around these two center fingers. And then I have the working yarn over here between my thumb and index. I move that over just like so. So I just lift it over in between the two fingers, pull back and cinch down, and that's how I do my slip knot. So now we're going to start doing our chain. So down below in the description you will see chains, recommended starting chains for various projects. For the swatch that I'm doing, I'm going to be chaining in 2 multiples of 9. So I'm going to chain 18. And I'm going to add 3 to the end. So you can get started with me. You can either chain for your entire project, or you can chain for the swatch. So I've got my slip knot that I made on my hook, and I've wrapped my yarn around my hook, and I'm just going to pull it through that loop that's on the hook to do my very first chain. And I'm going to keep doing in sets of 9 until I've reached the desired size for my project, and then I will add 3 to the end. So I'm going to end up with a total of 21 chains. So you guys may pause here, and then we'll be back in just a moment when you have your starting chain ready. So we are back, and I have my starting chain ready, and now we're going to begin doing row 1. So for row 1, we're going to be doing back loop only single crochets, but the beginning, so the very first stitch in the row and the very last stitch in the row in Mosaic, is always going to be a traditional single crochet. So we're going to be doing that traditional single crochet by skipping the very first chain. So this one right here, and the loop that's on our hook never counts. So we're going to skip that very first chain, and we're going to work right here into that second chain. So we just insert our hook under the V. So we want to make sure that we're under both of those loops. And now we want to grab our yarn and pull up a loop, and grab our yarn and pull through 2 to complete a traditional single crochet in the very first stitch. So now we're going to begin doing our back loop only single crochets. So we're going to identify our very next stitch, and we're just going to pick up the back loop only. So we're only going to have 1 loop there on our hook. And now we're going to grab our yarn, and we're going to pull up a loop, and then we're going to grab our yarn again and pull through 2, and that completes our first back loop only single crochet. So we're going to keep working that all the way down the rest of our stitches, and then we will meet back up when you guys have 1 stitch left, because we're going to do that traditional single crochet together, because that is really important to keeping nice straight sides on your mosaics. So you just keep working in that same manner, pause, and we'll meet back up at the end of the row. And we are back, and here we have 1 last stitch left. So we're going to insert and make sure that we get under the V. So we just want to get in there, and I've let it get a little bit tight because now that we're under both of those loops, we're under that V completely right here in the very last stitch of the row. We can grab our yarn and pull up a loop, and then we can grab our yarn and pull through 2 to finish out our traditional single crochet in the very last stitch of the row. And now I just like to chain up 2, clip my yarn, and I'm going to bind off by cinching down. You can bind off whatever way you're most comfortable with. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but this is how I do it. So I've just clipped my yarn. And now I'm going to go ahead and pull my hook on through, letting that tail pull all the way up. And then I grab just above those 2 chains I made, and I'm going to pull on my tail as I cinch down, making that little knot. Hopefully my camera will cooperate. So now we're going to move on to row 2. For row 2, we need to switch over to color B. So for me, that's going to be the blue color that I showed you guys at the beginning. But we want to make sure that we're getting under this V. We want to make sure that this little side chain right here, turning chain, does not accidentally get worked into. You're going to see it. It moves. You can push it down with your thumbnail to get it out of the way. We want to make sure that we're going under that V though. So we're going to maintain that traditional single crochet in the very first stitch. So if you take a look at your work, if you've never worked a mosaic before, that is how you make sure you get into the very first stitch as you move that turning chain down out of the way. So now we're just going to grab our, for me it's going to be the turquoisey blue color, but you're going to grab color B, and we're going to do a slip knot to get ready to add that color on to our work. So we just take, again, wrap around those 2 fingers, slide that over, cinch back, and you have your slip knot. We're already in the first stitch of the row. So this begins row 2. We're going to add our slip knot onto our hook, and then we are going to pull up that loop. Now we're going to grab and do a chain. So you can grab tail and working yarn or just your working yarn, but you want to chain 1. And then we're going to go back down here into this very first stitch. So we're making sure that we're going into that same stitch, very first one. And we're going to grab our yarn and pull up a loop. And we're going to grab our yarn and pull through all those little loops to do our traditional single crochet right here in the very first stitch. So row 2, we are also going to be working in the back loop only all the way down the row, and then doing our traditional single crochet in the very last stitch. So we're going to identify our very next stitch. We're going to grab our yarn and pull up a loop, and we are going to grab our yarn and pull through 2 to finish our first back loop only single crochet. So again, we're going to pick up that back loop only, and we're going to grab and pull up a loop. We're going to grab and pull through 2, and that finishes our second back loop only single crochet. So we just need to keep repeating this all the way down to the very last stitch in the row, where we will do our traditional single crochet. Try not to pull too tightly as you're doing this. You don't really want to separate your back loops. You want it all to kind of stay looking nice and solid, like a nice solid fabric. So pause here and meet back up with me when you are ready to do the very last stitch in this row. We're back here at the end of row 2. This is what our work is looking like so far. We have 1 stitch left to work into, and you can see that when you turn it, you see that V right there is the V. So we're going to insert our hook under that V, making sure we're under both loops, and then we're just going to pull up a loop, grab our yarn and pull through 2, and finishes out our traditional single crochet in the very last stitch of the row. Now we chain up 2. If you're following along exactly with me, we're going to chain up 2, clip our yarn, and we are going to bind off again. So you can continue to bind off whatever way you prefer, doesn't matter. Now we're going to move on to row 3. So here we are going back to the very first stitch in the row. So we never turn our work, and we're always working on one side being our right side of the project. The back side will be striped where we're not doing our mosaic design. So we're going to insert right there under the V. So make sure again you push down on that turning chain and get it out of your way so that you do not work into that. And we're going to grab now back to color A again. So you'll be switching back and forth between your colors. And we just need to do a quick little slip knot just like we have been doing. We're going to add that again onto our hook, and then we're just simply going to pull that up. We're going to pull that loop up, and now we're going to grab our yarn and do a chain. And now we're going to make sure we're going back into that same exact first stitch. Going right back there into that same stitch. We're going to grab our yarn and pull up a loop. Grab our yarn and pull through 2 to complete our traditional single crochet. Now for row 3, we're actually going to begin doing the mosaic here. So we're going to do 3 drop down double crochets right here over the next 3 stitches. And this begins our repeat for this row. So our repeat begins with the 3 drop down double crochets. So we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook. We're going to identify our very next stitch, which is right here. We're going to slide down 2 rows below, and we're going to find this little bump right here. That's what we want to pick up. Now we're going to grab our yarn, make sure our tail's out of the way. We're going to grab our yarn and we're going to pull up a loop, keeping nice loose tension. So you don't want to draw this lower loop up. So nice loose tension. Now we're going to grab and pull through 2. And we're going to grab and pull through 2, and that completes our first drop down double crochet. And as you can see, it's starting to cover up some of this blue row. So we're going to wrap our yarn again because we have to do 3 of these. We're going to identify the very next stitch. We're going to slide down 2 rows below. So we're just sliding straight down, finding this little bump right here. And that's what we want to pick up. It's our front loop left by doing the back loop only single crochets. So we're going to grab and pull up a loop, and then we're going to grab and pull through 2, and grab and pull through 2. So that's number 2 drop down double crochet. We need to do 1 more. So we're going to identify the very next stitch, and we're going to slide down 2 rows below. We're going to find that little bump again right there, and we're just going to turn our hook and pick that up. Now we're going to grab our yarn and we're going to pull up a loop, nice loose tension. We're going to grab our yarn and pull through 2. We're going to grab our yarn and pull through 2, and that completes our 3 drop down double crochets. So now we need to do a total of 6 back loop only single crochets to end out this repeat. So we're going to identify our very next stitch, but this time we're going to fold back those 3 drop downs that we just did. And back here in this row, you're going to see we're covering 3 stitches up when we put those in place. So that's how we can make sure we're staying on track. And we're going to go into the very next stitch and do our back loop only single crochet. Now we're going to do our second back loop only single crochet. So remember, we've got to do a total of 6. There's 2 right here into the very next stitch. We're doing number 3 back loop only single crochet. Here's number 4. And here's number 5. And last but not least, number 6, and that ends our repeat for this row. So our repeat began over here with our 3 drop down double crochets, and then we do 6 back loop only single crochets. So now to continue on down your row, you just start your repeat again. So we're going to do 3 drop down double crochets. So here's our very next stitch. Slide directly down 2 rows below, and you'll find that little bump. I'm going to pick that up, and we're going to finish out our drop down double crochet. So here's the finish. Number 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. There's our 3 drop down double crochets, and now we move on doing our 6 back loop only single crochets. So there's 1, here's 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. So if you had a bigger swatch, or if you were starting an entire project, you have just ended your second repeat that you did. So if you're going to keep continuing on down your row, you're going to start again doing your 3 drop down double crochets followed by your 6 back loop only single crochets. And you're just going to keep repeating that over and over and over all the way down the rest of your row. So you can pause here unless you're ready to move on to the end of your row. We're going to be doing that now. So we have one last stitch left right here at the end of the row. So we're going to insert our hook under the V, making sure we're under both of those loops, and then we're just going to grab and pull up a loop, grab and pull through 2 to finish our traditional single crochet, the very last stitch of the row. And then we can chain up 2, clip our yarn, and bind off. We're back at the beginning of row 4, and I'm about to join on color B this time. And I do want to say from here, what I'm going to be doing is showing one repeat of the pattern. Now that I've shown you what I mean by continue to work down the same exact way, I'm going to show you the one repeat, and then you'll be able to finish on down your row doing that same repeat over and over. Your beginnings and ends of your row will work out perfectly if you just follow your repeat. So we're going to try to speed up so we don't have such a long tutorial by cutting back on the number of times I show that repeat. But just remember, you can always refer down to the description. I have the row start times down there for you, so if you need to see it again, you can go down and tap that little timestamp and it'll bring you right back to the beginning of the row. So all I've done is drawn up my loop just like before. So I have the slip knot that was on my hook. I'm inserted into the very first stitch of the row. And now we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to go back down here into that same very first stitch. So make sure that you're getting into that first stitch. If you don't, you can throw your count off. So we want to grab our yarn and just pull up our loop. And we're going to finish out our traditional single crochet. And now our repeat for row 4 is going to start now. So for our repeat, we're going to be doing 5 back loop only single crochets followed by 4 drop down double crochets. So let's get started with that. So the repeat begins right here. The very next stitch, we're going to pick up the back loop only. We're going to grab and pull up our loop. We're going to grab and pull through 2. So that's our first back loop only single crochet, and we've got to do a total of 5 of these. So there's 1. Go here into the very next stitch. We're going to do number 2. Into the very next stitch, back loop only, number 3. Into the very next stitch, back loop only, number 4. And then this very next stitch, back loop only, single crochet, number 5. Now we're going to start doing our drop down double crochet. So we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook. We're going to identify our very next stitch. We're just going to slide straight down 2 rows below, and we're finding that little front loop that we left, that little bump. And we're going to pick that up. We're going to grab our yarn and pull up a loop with nice loose tension. We're going to grab our yarn and pull through 2. Grab our yarn and pull through 2. So that's our first drop down double crochet. We're going to wrap our yarn again, identify our very next stitch, slide down and find that little bump right there 2 rows below, and turn and pick that up. Now we're going to grab and pull up a loop, grab and pull through 2, grab and pull through 2. So that's our second drop down double crochet. Wrap again, go right here for our very next stitch, slide down, finding our little bump, pick that up and do our second drop down double crochet. Or I'm sorry, our third. And now we're going to wrap again, sorry. And we're going to go right here to the very next stitch. And this is our 4th drop down double crochet. And that ends our repeat for this row. So now you're going to begin again doing 5 back loop only single crochets, followed by 4 drop down double crochets all the way down the rest of your row. And we'll meet back up to do the last stitch in the row, where we're going to do our traditional single crochet in just a moment. So please pause here and meet back up with me when you're ready to do the very last stitch in your row. 5 back loop only single crochets, 4 drop down double crochets, all the way to the end of your row. You're back here at the end of row 4 with me. We have one last stitch left to work, so we're going to be doing our traditional single crochet. So we've gone in under both of those loops. You see right there. Now we're just going to finish out our traditional single crochet. And I like to chain up 2, so that's what I'm going to do. You can do whatever you prefer to bind off. We're back for row number 5, and this is what your work is looking like. I have already joined on with color A in my very first stitch in the row. So we are going to start out doing our repeat right away yet again. So that's going to be one thing you're going to be doing all throughout this tutorial, is your repeat starts right after your traditional single crochet. So now we're going to be doing 2 back loop only single crochets in the next 2 stitches. So we're going to insert right here into the very next stitch, and we're going to do our back loop only single crochet. First one. So we got 1. Now we're going to do number 2. Now we're going to do 3 drop down double crochets over these next 3 stitches. So we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook. We're going to identify our very next stitch. So right here, we're going to slide down 2 rows below, and we're going to find that first little bump right there. So there is our bump. We're going to pick that up, and we're going to start doing our drop down double crochet. So our first one, there's 1. Take a look, and if you get a little too tight, you can just pull on that, and that will bring it right back into position. So now we're going to do number 2 drop down double crochet. So here's our very next stitch. We're going to slide down 2 rows below, and we're going to pick up that little bump, and we're just going to simply finish out our second drop down double crochet. Now we're going to do our third drop down double crochet. Slide down 2 rows below, find that little bump, and now we're going to finish out our drop down double crochet number 3. Now we need to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. So we're going to insert right there into the back loop only and do 1 back loop only single crochet. Here's number 2, number 3, and number 4, and that ends our repeat for this row. So now you're going to start back over here with your 2 back loop only single crochets, then 3 drop down double crochets, then you're going to do 4 back loop only single crochets. So you're going to keep repeating that on down the rest of your row. So you are going to start your repeat again with 2 back loop only single crochets. So there's 1, here's 2, and then you'll start doing your 3 drop down double crochets. So there's 1, here is number 2. Let me do that a little bit better so y'all can see. Let's try from a different angle. There we go. Then there's number 2, and last but not least, here is number 3. Stitch right here. And then we're going to end the repeat by doing 4 back loop only single crochets. There's 1, here's 2, number 3, and number 4. So for those of you who are going to keep going on down your row, you're going to start again with your 2 back loop only single crochets, 3 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets. So pause and meet back up with me when you are ready to do the end of row 5. And hopefully you are back and ready to do the end of row 5. We have 1 last stitch left, and we know that's always going to be a traditional single crochet. So we've inserted under both loops. We are pulling up and finishing it out just like we would do any other traditional single crochet. So now you're going to clip your yarn, and you're going to be joining on with color B this time. We're going to move on to row 6. We're back, and this is row number 6. We are going to be working in color B. I have already joined on to the very first stitch of the row with a traditional single crochet. Now our repeat for row 6 is going to begin. We're going to be doing 2 drop down double crochets to begin our repeat. So right here, very next stitch, we are going to insert, we're going to wrap our yarn and go down 2 rows below and pick up our front loop. And now we're just going to pull up a loop, nice loose tension, pull through 2, and grab and pull through 2. Finishing out our first drop down double crochet. We need to do our second. So here's our very next stitch. We slide down, grab our little loop, and finish out our second drop down double crochet. Now we're going to be doing 5 back loop only single crochets. So over these next 5 stitches, we're going to do our back loop only single crochets. So there's 1, here's number 2, back loop only, here's number 3, number 4, and number 5. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets right here over these next 2 stitches to end our repeat. So there is our first drop down double crochet. Now we're going to wrap again, find our very next stitch, slide down 2 rows below, and pick up that little bump right there. Finish out our second drop down double crochet, which ends our repeat. So our repeat began over here with our 2 drop down double crochets. Then we did 5 back loop only single crochets, and our repeat ends with 2 drop down double crochets. So you're going to complete your row by beginning your repeat again, doing 2 drop down double crochets, then 5 back loop only single crochets, and ending with 2 drop down double crochets. So let's pause here, meet back up with me when you are ready to do the end of row 6. And here we are at the end of row 6. We have 1 stitch left, so you can see we've just ended our repeat right there. And now we're going to identify this very last stitch, and we're going to insert under the V, making sure we go under both of those loops. Try to show that real good for you guys. Hopefully you can see. But we're under the V. That's the point, is we're going completely in that stitch, and we are finishing out our traditional single crochet. About to say the wrong thing. So now we just bind off and we move on up for row 7. We're back, and this is the beginning of row 7. I'm going to be joining on with you this time just to give you a little refresher. Keep in mind, right here on the side is a turning chain. If you can move it with your nail, if it'll scoot down, then that is not your first stitch, that is a turning chain. So just make sure that you're getting into this very first V right here at the beginning of the row each and every time when you're starting your new row. So we're going to be joining on with color A this time. So for me, that's the yellow yarn. So we've got a slip knot, and we're just going to tighten that down right there. Now we're just going to draw up that loop nice and easy, and we're going to grab, and we are going to grab our working yarn, and we're going to chain 1. We're going to go back down here into that very first stitch and let your tail fall out of the way, and you want to grab your yarn and pull up a loop, and grab your yarn and pull through all those little loops to finish out your traditional single crochet right here in the very first stitch. Now our repeat for this row begins with 4 back loop only single crochet. So we're going to identify our very next stitch. Want to make sure we're not missing any. We're going to do our back loop only single crochet right there, very next stitch. So there's our first back loop only single crochet. Now I've got to do number 2. Here's number 3, back loop only, and number 4. Now we're going to do 3 drop down double crochets over these next 3 stitches. So we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook, identify our next stitch, slide down 2 rows below and find that little front loop, the bump, and grab and pull up a loop, nice loose tension, grab and pull through 2, grab and pull through 2. Now we're going to wrap again because we've got to do a total of 3 drop down double crochets. So we're just going to repeat that a second time. Now we're going to wrap one more time, and we're going to do our 3rd drop down double crochet, making sure that we're picking up that front bump. And now we're going to continue our repeat with 2 back loop only single crochets to end it. So So right here in the very next stitch, I'm going to do my first back loop only single crochet, and here is my second, and that ends our repeat for this row. So our repeat began over here with 4 back loop only single crochets right here. Then we did 3 drop down double crochets and 2 back loop only single crochets. So you're going to start your repeat again by doing the 4 back loop only single crochets. Then you'll keep going with your 3 drop down double crochets, and then you will end it with 2 more back loop only single crochets. And that will finish you out. So you're going to keep working in that exact same manner, so you can pause here and meet back up with me when you are ready to move on to row number 8. Here we are at the end of row 7. I've completed my second repeat. So my repeat began over here with the 4 back loop only single crochets, 3 drop down double crochets, 2 back loop only single crochets, and now last stitch in the row gets its traditional single crochet going under both those loops. And that finishes this row. So we're going to move on now to row number 8. And we're back for row number 8. We're back in color B this time. So for me, that's the blue, and I've already joined all of my traditional single crochet in the very first stitch. Our repeat's going to begin for row 8 right now, and we're going to begin with 4 drop down double crochets over these next 4 stitches. So we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook, identify our very next stitch, and we are just going to come down 2 rows below and pick up that front bump. We're going to finish out our first drop down double crochet. So there's number 1. We've got to do a total of 4. Next stitch, slide down, pick up that loop, and there is number 2 drop down double crochet. Wrap again, next stitch, slide down, and find that little front loop that we left by doing those back loop only single crochets. It's number 3 drop down double crochet. Last but not least, we have number 4 drop down double crochet right here in the very next stitch. Apologize, my tail's kind of getting wild and in the way. So there's 4 drop down double crochets to begin our repeat, and now we're going to do 5 back loop only single crochets over these next 5 stitches. So there's 1, here's 2, here's number 3, back loop only, number 4, and number 5. That ends our repeat for this row. So our repeat started over here with our 4 drop down double crochets, then we do 5 back loop only single crochets. So you can pause here and finish up row 8, and you're going to meet back up with me when you are ready to do row 9. Remember, last stitch in the row is always going to be that traditional single crochet, so we can keep nice straight edges. This is the beginning of row number 9. We've joined on with color A, so that's the yellow color for me, with a single crochet in the very first stitch of the row. Now our repeat for this row is going to begin immediately. We're going to start our repeat by doing 6 back loop only single crochets over the next 6 stitches. So we're going to insert our hook right here into the very next stitch. Oops. Insert right in there and pick up a loop. Finish out your back loop only single crochet. So there's number 1. Here is number 2. Got to do a total of 6, remember. So here's number 3, number 4, back loop only single crochets, number 5, number 6. Now we're going to do 3 drop down double crochets over these next 3 stitches. So right here's our very next stitch. We're going to slide down 2 rows below and find that little bump. Finish out our first drop down double crochet. There's 1. Wrap again, find our next stitch, slide down, pick up that little bump. Here's number 2. Drop down double crochet. And last but not least, here is number 3. drop down double crochet. And that ends our repeat for this row. So you're going to start again by doing the 6 back loop only single crochets, followed by 3 drop down double crochets all the way to the end of your row. Just keep repeating that over and over, and we'll meet back up when you're ready to move on to row number 10. We're back and we're starting row 10. We're going to join on into the very first stitch of the row. I've already got my slip knot ready with color B, so we're moving back to blue for me. You're going to change back over to color B. We're just going to draw up that loop, and then you're going to grab your tail and working yarn, or just your working yarn, and chain 1, and then you want to go back down into that same exact first stitch, going back into that same stitch, and we're going to finish out our traditional single crochet to start out row 10. So now our repeat for this row is going to begin immediately. We're going to be doing 4 drop down double crochets followed by 5 back loop only single crochets. So we're going to start in the very next stitch right here. We're going to identify and we're going to wrap our yarn because we're going to be doing a drop down double crochet. So very next stitch right here, doing our drop down double crochet. Here's number 1. We've got to do a total of 4. So we're going to wrap again, find our very next stitch, slide directly down and find that little bump. I'm going to pick that up and do our second drop down double crochet. Wrap again, find the very next stitch, and we are going to do our third drop down double crochet. Wrap one more time, find the very next stitch, and we are going to do our fourth drop down double crochet. Now we're going to continue on by going into the next stitch, doing a back loop only single crochet. So there's 1. Got to do a total of 5 of these. Here's number 2. Here is number 3. And here is number 4. And our repeat ends with number 5. So our repeat ends here with our 5th back loop only single crochet. So we're going to start again. We're going to continue on down our row. We're going to start with our 4 drop down double crochets, followed by our 5 back loop only single crochets. So you're going to pause here and you're going to meet back up with me when you're ready to move on to row number 11. But you're going to start your repeat again, doing your 4 drop down double crochets, and then you're going to do 5 back loop only single crochets on down the rest of your row. So pause here, we'll be back in just a moment, and we're going to move right on along to row number 11. We are back, and this is row number 11. I've joined on with color A, so that's the yellow color for me. And we're going to begin doing our repeat immediately. So you want to join on doing your traditional single crochet in the very first stitch. And now we're going to start doing 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. So this begins our repeat. We're going to start with our first back loop only single crochet right here in the very next stitch. Here's our second. Here's number 3. And here's number 4. Now we're going to do 3 drop down double crochets over these next 3 stitches. So right here, in the very next stitch, we're going to slide down 2 rows below and find that bump. Nice loose tension. Finish out our first drop down. Here is our second. Going right here into the very next stitch. And here is our third right here, very next stitch. Now we're going to do 2 back loop only single crochets to end out our repeat. So we're going to identify our very next stitch. And we're going to do our first back loop only single crochet. And here is our second back loop only single crochet. That ends our repeat. So we're going to start again. Our repeat began over here with the 4 back loop only single crochets. Then we do 3 drop down double crochets, followed by 2 back loop only single crochets. So you're going to start your repeat again by doing 4 back loop only single crochets, and then you're going to continue on with the 3 drop down double crochets and 2 back loop only single crochets all the way down to the end of your row. So you can pause here, you can meet back up with me when you are ready to move on to row number 12. Work is looking like after completing row number 11. The end of the row, of course, ends perfectly with our 2 back loop only single crochets at the end of that second repeat. In my case, I had 2 repeats. And then we did our traditional single crochet in the very last stitch of the row. So now we're going to join on in color B for row number 12. So we're just going to come over here and we're going to identify this very first stitch. We're going to insert under that V because we're doing a traditional single crochet this time. So we're going to join on. We're going to draw up that loop. And now we're going to chain 1, go back down in the same exact first stitch. So go right back there into that same stitch, that tail out of the way, and do our traditional single crochet. Now our repeat for this row is going to begin. We're doing 2 drop down double crochets in the very next 2 stitches. So we're going to identify our very next stitch. We're going to slide down and do our drop down double crochet. We've got to do a total of 2, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. So we're going to identify our very next stitch, slide down, pick that up, and finish up our second drop down double crochet. Now we're going to continue on with this repeat, doing 5 back loop only single crochets over these next 5 stitches. So right here, very next stitch, we're doing back loop only single crochet. So there is number 1. Here's number 2, the very next stitch. Number 3. Number 4. And number 5. Now we're going to do 2 drop down double crochets over these next 2 stitches. Slide down, find that little front bump, nice loose tension. Finish out your drop down double crochet. There's number 1. Next stitch, slide down, 2 rows below, there's number 2. Now we end our repeat. So our repeat would begin again by doing 2 drop down double crochets in the next 2 stitches, because that's how we began over here. 2 drop down double crochets, 5 back loop only single crochets, 2 drop down double crochets. So you're going to keep working that exact same manner on down the rest of your row. So we're going to start our repeat again with 2 drop down double crochets. Here's 1, and here is 2. Now we do 5 back loop only single crochets over the next 5 stitches. So there's 1, here's number 2, here is number 3, number 4, and number 5. Oops. And then we are going to do 2 drop down double crochets over the next 2 stitches to end our repeat. And we have 1 more stitch right here. Do our second drop down double crochet, and that ends the repeat. So you're going to keep working that exact same manner, doing 2 drop downs, 5 back loops, 2 drop downs, all the way down to the end of your row. And if you're doing a swatch like me, you are already at the end of your row, so you know you need to go into that very last stitch right there with a traditional single crochet to finish out that row. Now you can just chain up 2 or whatever way you prefer to bind off. We're back. This is row 13 and we have joined on with color A, so that's the yellow color for me. We've done a traditional single crochet in the very first stitch of the row. We're going to begin our repeat for row 13 right away. We're going to do 2 back loop only single crochets over these next 2 stitches. So we're just going to identify the very next stitch, and do our back loop only single crochet. There's one, here's two. So we've done our 2 back loop only single crochets. Now we're going to do 3 drop down double crochets right here over these next 3 stitches. So we're going to identify our very next stitch, slide down directly down 2 rows below, pick up that bump. We're going to finish out your drop down double crochet. We're going to do our second drop down double crochet. And we're going to do our third drop down double crochet, just sliding down 2 rows below. Now we're going to move on doing 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches. So you're just going to identify your very next stitch, and remember you can always fold these back. Whatever number of double crochets you've done, that's how many stitches they should cover. So 3 covers those 3 stitches back there. I know that this is my next stitch, so I'm going to do 4 back loop only single crochets over these next 4 stitches to end my repeat. So there's number 2 back loop only single crochet, here's number 3, and here's number 4. So that ends our repeat for this row. So we're going to start back over again doing 2 back loop only single crochets, 3 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets. So you can pause here, meet back up with me when you finished out the entire row and you're ready to do the end of row 13 together. We're back. We're here at the end of row 13, and I've just finished out my second repeat. So I've just finished my 4 drop or back loop only single crochets. So our repeat began over here with the 2 back loop only single crochets, 3 drop down double crochets, 4 back loop only single crochets. So I just kept repeating that on down the rest of my row. So now we're here at the end of the row. We know the very last stitch in the row is always going to be a traditional single crochet. And that ends up row 13. So now we're going to pause and move on to row 14. We are back, and this is what your work is looking like after you've finished up row 13. We're moving on now to row 14. We're joining on with color B, so that's the blue color for me. And I've already joined on my traditional single crochet right there in that very first stitch of the row. So we're going to start our repeat right away. We're going to be doing 5 back loop only single crochets over these next 5 stitches. So we're going to go ahead and insert into the very next stitch into the back loop only, draw up our loop, and finish up our back loop only single crochet. So there's number 1, number 2, now we're going to do number 3, number 4, and number 5. So now we need to do 4 drop down double crochets over these next 4 stitches. So we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook. We're going to find our very next stitch, slide down 2 rows below, grabbing up that bump, and we're going to finish out our first drop down double crochet. So there's number 1. I'm going to wrap. Here's number 2. Remember, we've got to do a total of 4. Here's number 3. And last but not least, here's number 4. And that finishes out our repeat for this row. So our repeat began over here with 5 back loop only single crochets, and then we do 4 drop down double crochets. So we're just going to start your repeat again. You're going to start again doing 5 back loop only single crochets, and you're going to end it with your 4 drop down double crochets. So keep working back and forth on down the row, 5 back loops, 4 drops, until you have reached the end of your row. The very last stitch will of course be the traditional single crochet, just like always. So you can pause here and meet me back up when you are ready to move on to row 15. For those of you who are just doing one repeat of the pattern, you just want to have one section of this particular arrow design, you're going to be stopping at row 15. So I will show you guys also in the same video what row, or I'll tell you what row to rewind to if you're going to move up for additional repeats of the pattern. And I'll pop on screen or at the end of the video what that will look like when you move up for additional rows. Alright, so here we are back for row 15, and I'm about to join on. I'm in the first stitch of this row, and I've already got color A, which is the yellow color, ready to go on my hook. I've got a slip knot there. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw that loop on up, and then I'm going to chain 1 and do my traditional single crochet right here in this same first stitch. So we're going to make sure we go back down that very first stitch. And if your knot from your slip knot kind of gets in your way, you can always pull that back and it'll kind of tuck that out of your way. So now the repeat for row 15 starts. We're going to be doing 3 drop down double crochets over the next 3 stitches. So we're going to begin by wrapping our yarn around our hook. We're going to identify our next stitch, slide down 2 rows below, go ahead and pick up that bump, finish out our first drop down double crochet. So this starts our repeat. Got 1, 2, and 3 right here, very next stitch. 1 in each of those next 3 stitches, drop down double crochet. Now we're going to do 6 back loop only single crochets over the next 6 stitches to end our repeat for the row. So there's number 1, here is number 2, here's number 3, number 4, and number 5. Number 6 ends the repeat. So if we're going to continue on down our row, we're going to start back over. Our repeat begins with the 3 drop down double crochets, and then we have these 6 back loop only single crochets. So you're going to keep working that exact same manner all the way down the rest of your row, and you'll do a traditional single crochet in the very last stitch of the row. For those of you who are just doing this one repeat of the pattern, you're going to use it just one section in your project, you can stop here at row 15. For everybody else, we're going to do row 16, which will be required for you to keep moving up, doing additional repeats of the pattern for like a larger section in a project. So for everyone who's wanting to move up, you're going to stay tuned for row 16, and then I'll explain how you rewind back in this video to start back over to keep moving up and up and up for as many repeats of the pattern as you like. We've completed 1 repeat of the pattern right here. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to get ready to move up to row 16. If you guys are not doing multiples of this design, you're just going to do the one section, then you may end here. We're back. We're about to do row 16, which is required if you're going to use multiples. Keep repeating the same design up for additional repeats of the pattern. So we are starting with row 16 in color B, which I've joined on to the first stitch in the row, and the repeat for this row is pretty simple. We're going to be doing 5 back loop only single crochets followed by 4 drop down double crochets all the way to the end of the row. So we've got our first stitch, which is the single crochet. So now in the very next stitch, we're going to begin doing our 5 back loop only single crochets. So there's our first one. Here's our second. Number 3. Number 4. And number 5. Now we're going to do 4 drop down double crochets over these next 4 stitches. Here's number 1. Wrap again. Identify number 2. Try not to drop your stitch. Here's number 3. And here is number 4 right here. That ends our repeat for this row. So you're going to keep working on down the rest of your row, doing a total of 5 back loop only single crochets, followed by 4 drop down double crochets until you reach the end of your row. And then you will be rewinding. After you've completed row 16, your work will be looking like this, and then you will be able to rewind in the same video back to row 5. You're going to want to keep repeating row 5 through row 16 over and over and over to continue to move up on your mosaic project. Like if you're doing something larger like a blanket with this, a throw pillow, table runner, that sort of thing. So you'll keep repeating that over and over as you move up, and then you will have a staggering stack of designs. You'll have arrows moving in this direction as well as moving in the opposite direction. And that'll just be created by working rows 5 through 16 over and over and over. So until next time, thank you as always for watching. Please make sure that you give this video a thumbs up. Please leave a comment down below. And if you did like it and you think it could be useful to somebody else, please feel free to share it on any of your social medias. And as always, you can find me over on Instagram. Links down below to my Instagram account. And until next time, bye for now.